Man, ladies and gentlemen, I don't even know where to begin with this one. I really don't. You know, not only is it just another prime example of why left is right, up is down, and common sense is hard to find, but also why we have seen people over the years more and more speak out against the idea of men competing in women's sports. Look, we all know at the end of the day, when you have a dude competing in a physical sport against women, you put their safety at risk, and we have seen women in the past getting injured because men have the biological advantage. So naturally, they're going to be stronger, they're going to hit harder, and they are also going to tackle harder. And this leads us to today's story, because a female rugby player out in the Netherlands, and I simply cannot believe this, but they were left screaming in agony after a trans rugby player committed a rash challenge and it resulted in her ligaments being torn and her left knee out of its socket. What a disgrace. And because this girl was put in hospital by a dude, you can obviously hear the woke liberal feminists in Europe, in the United States, across the world in uproar over this. Oh wait, you know, I can hear the lawnmower outside, I can hear the TV downstairs, but I can't hear the liberal feminists being very angry about this one. Maybe it's just my hearing. As you know, I'm getting older as each day passes, so maybe it's just me. But I highly doubt it. This just can't go on any longer, man. We cannot have girls getting injured, having their ligaments being torn off just because a dude wants to compete in their sports. But then again, what do I know, huh? What do we all know? Apparently we're just all mean and hateful. Now, before we get into this story, ladies and gentlemen, if you could, make sure to leave a like rating, as it really, really helps out the video. If you're new, hit that subscribe button, turn on bell notifications so you never miss a video, and let's get into this nonsense. So, the Mail Online have reported, and what a headline this is, for all the wrong reasons. Female rugby player left with sickening injury after a horror tackle from transgender opponent, and she asks, how was this allowed to happen? Because the individual truth in this lovely, stunning and brave world matters more than women's safety, matters more than truth, reality, common sense. And when you put the feelings of dudes, the individual truth, on a higher pedestal than all of those things, you end up with these situations. A young female rugby player who was left screaming in agony after a transgender rival tore apart her knee ligaments has accused Sporting Chiefs of letting her down. I think they've done more than that. Alina King, 20, suffered a torn ACL and MCL in January in the Netherlands after her biologically male opponent popped her left knee out of its socket with a rash challenge. Now, I tell you, I have torn my MCL in the past, and I'm sure some people watching right now have had perhaps similar injuries, and you know, if you've been through it, it is one of the most painful things, and she has torn her ACL on top of that. So I can't imagine what she's going through. And again, this was allowed to happen. She was put in the hospital because a dude was allowed to compete in women's rugby. Now, of course, when you compete in rugby, there is a chance of a bad tackle happening. We all know this. But if this dude wasn't competing in women's rugby, this wouldn't have happened. And when you have a dude who, as I said at the beginning, is going to be stronger, of course the tackle most likely is going to hurt a girl that is competing. I don't know what politics are like out in the Netherlands, but people need to wake up ASAP. But she's now facing long life pain and 6 months of physiotherapy just to run again. She is asking why the Dutch Rugby Association allows transgender athletes to compete against women, because they're very stunning and brave, and it's all about inclusivity. Serious injuries are part and parcel of the risk of playing rugby, as I said, but King insists the sheer strength she was exposed to was something that should not have been allowed in the women's game. I felt the strength being used against me. It's nothing that I can explain because I don't have that strength myself, King told the Times. A cis woman, look man, I don't know how she's in this situation and she's still using language like that, but anyway, a cis woman, she says, could not have pulled my leg out of its socket. I heard a really loud pop. That's when I started screaming. My leg was on fire. But there she is in hospital, I believe. There is the transgender player there, Ashley Mooney. She is now taking legal advice and has sought stories from other players as per the Times. Her opponent, Ashley Mooney, played in the game but after was subsequently suspended and missed 4 games. Wow. Mooney returned to action earlier in May and won player of the match at the weekend. Get out of here, man. In a blog post, King describes how she had already been nervous about facing her opponent after Mooney allegedly caused a black eye, rib, and spine injuries, with one of my lovely teammates coming off the pitch crying. Look, these women should have refused to compete instantly. That incident, however, was raised with the Dutch Rugby Union, she says, but the reply came back that it's fine. is it now? During the match against Breeder Dames Rugby Club, King describes how she was being held by two players as a maul was forming when the trans player began to tackle one of her legs, not both as you should, with her shoulder pressing below her kneecap. The trans player came in from the left side and my knee doesn't bend that way, so the trans player pushed his shoulder into my knee and with immense strength pulled his arms closer to himself, King writes in a heartbreaking blog. I then heard a massive popping sound. I screamed my lungs out. The trans player had pulled my pretty little knee out of its socket and broke my MCL and ACL in one single movement. But nah, dudes should be allowed to compete in women's sports. It's completely normal and safe, right? Later, I heard that teammates on the pitch had to walk away with their hands over their ears because my screams sounded too painful. King had to be carried off by her teammates because the opposing club did not provide a stretcher. Wow. She adds, I knew it was serious. I didn't feel connected to my knee at all. Later I would find out my nerves were dead because the ligaments were completely torn apart. I understood that yesterday was way too far away and tomorrow would not look the same. I kept going back to that moment where I felt the male strength of this trans player. It is something that still goes through my head. It was a type of strength that I only partly ever felt while playing with the older boys in my youth. The kind of strength that women can't match. Women do not possess that strength because, again, men have the biological advantage. I know that upsets a lot of woke liberals, will probably upset the woke activists in the Netherlands, but it's the truth. Deal with it. She goes on to explain that transphobia has made people frightened to speak up about safety. I mean, I don't know why people are so scared of being called transphobic. It means absolutely nothing. Inclusion is important, she told the Times. That's also not what I'm on about. It's to do with safety. Women want the best for everyone. We want everyone to feel included, so of course people are like, why not? But then you actually see the reasons why it's not possible. We have women's spaces for a reason. Yeah, look, you cannot have inclusion and safety and fairness in women's sports. The two do not mix, because inclusion today means men who identify as women being allowed into women's sports. So when you allow that to happen, safety, fairness, that goes out the window. Dutch news also reports that club officials had previously been concerned about one particular player who had caused multiple injuries. The Dutch Rugby Union has not set a formal policy on transgender players, although they did convene for a discussion around the subject on May the 9th. And it's probably still the same. They're not going to change their rules. Doesn't matter if girls get injured. Doesn't matter if they get torn MCLs and ACLs. Men have to be allowed to compete in women's sports because their feelings matter more. They have since set up a group of experts to assess whether they must adapt their stance on transgender participation. A Dutch Rugby Union board member told the Times, inclusion, fairness, and player safety are extremely important principles of the sport of rugby, precisely because the risk of injury is higher in rugby. RN takes safety on the field very seriously. This is why the Federation applies strict rules when it comes to dangerous play. Yeah, you apply strict rules, but you still allow men to compete. How does that make any sense? It doesn't. But their laissez-faire attitude until now is out of line with World Rugby, which in 2020 became the first international sports federation to ban trans women from the elite and international levels of the sport. Then in 2022, the Rugby Football League and Rugby Football Union banned transgender players from female-only formats. By 2023, the ban applied across all of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. Yeah, and now it's time for the Netherlands to follow suit. Because do you want more girls getting injured? Do you want girls' safety being put at risk? Because if you do, allow men to compete. Who knows, maybe people out in the Netherlands might see this video, people with any sort of power anyway, and it might wake them up just a little bit and they'll go, yeah, you know what? Let's put this to bed right now. But leave your thoughts down below, ladies and gentlemen, on this whole situation. What are your thoughts on this story? It's going to be an interesting comment section, that is for sure. Make sure to leave a like rating if you're new. Hit that subscribe button, turn on bell notifications so you never miss a video. Share this video. But until next time, it has been your host, JD. Have a great day, stay safe, and I'm out. Peace.